Você está tirando nossa imagem?
Thank you.
Oh, wow. Amazing. This is Gulherme Kastrup, Brazilian percussionist, music producer, born in Rio de Janeiro, joining us from São Paulo, where he's been living and working with recognized singers and songwriting such as Maria Bethânia, Arnaldo Antunes. His work with the singer Elza Soares, A Mulher do Fim do Mundo, received many awards, including a Latin Grammy. That was amazing, Guilherme. Thank you.
Thank you a lot. Easy.
And I think the name of the song you just played is Vento Bom from your latest CD.
Yeah, like a Good Wings. And it was from my first CD, Castrupismo, that has my name. Now I'm releasing my second album that's it's inspired in the book of Pedro Capra. It's the Turning Point. The name of my album is Turning Point, inspired of this philosophical idea that give us the hope that this point that we are passing through is turning us to another good era, and not only this bad moments that we are passing through. It's just the end of this era and the beginning of a new one. So my last album is inspired in this idea, the turning points.
Wonderful, Guilherme. Congratulations on this beautiful work. We are going to put the website of your website as well as your CD in our materials and our website. And thank you for joining us and adding inspiration to our conference.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. And for those of you joining us both at Zoom and Facebook, welcome to BayBrazil Conference edition number 9. As most of you know, today we are concluding our special conference 3-month program. June marked the 10th anniversary of BayBrazil. To celebrate this milestone, we expanded our signature event into weekly webinars where we discussed the various sectors of the innovation economy in Brazil and in the US. We miss seeing you. We really miss the energy, the conversations of our in-person conferences and other events are so unique, and we really miss catching up with you. On the other hand, more of you in Brazil are learning about the Silicon Valley tech scene, and more of Americans all over are learning about the Brazilian entrepreneurial scene. So I see that as the silver lining of this whole thing that we are going through. So before inviting our today's guest, I would like to introduce BayBrazil to some of you that are joining us for the first time today. And I want to share my screen here with you. And just to give you a sense of what we've been doing at BayBrazil in these past 10 years. I hope you can see my screen. So I founded the BayBrazil in 2010. At that time, the Brazil's entrepreneurial community was starting to flourish. However, in the San Francisco Bay Area, not only was no one talking about Brazil, but entrepreneurs, engineers, tech leaders didn't know one another. So I founded BayBrazil to build the Brazilian American tech community in Silicon Valley and connect it with Brazil. One of the instruments we use to bring this community together is events. So we start building our tech hub from the ground up, one conversation at a time, one meeting at a time, one introduction at a time. Today, we are engaging thousands. We are engaging thousands in the Bay Area, in Brazil, and all over the US, and even in regions of Europe. We are a community of over 15,000 people. We connected and introduced over 100 Brazilian and American small and medium-sized companies for them to develop new relationships and benchmarking and engaging in potential partnerships. We've organized over 150 in-person events, as well as hundreds of private meetings to promote dialogue within our tech hub. And we are fostering entrepreneurship by facilitating the access of Brazilian and American startups to potential new mentors and new investors. So we all know the economic challenges Brazil has faced. However, its entrepreneurial community continues developing, and BayBrazil is playing a part in it. In 2012, we launched the BayBrazil annual conference at Stanford University. We gathered founders, investors, private sector leaders to discuss technology, innovation, and the roles of Brazil in the US in the global economy. Not only we are presenting in-depth dialogues, but we are offering tech leaders the opportunity to meet and learn from one another, and also from prominent founders such as Brian Acton, co-founder of WhatsApp, that was with us in 2015, Mike Krieger, that was with us at Google in 2017. Mike Krieger is the co-founder of Instagram. The latest in-person editions of our annual conference were at LinkedIn in San Francisco, and last year at SRI International in Menlo Park, and many of you joining us today were there with us. And we keep building and bringing our community together through different programs. So here is some of the programs that we are building for our partners to engage in meaningful dialogue, to get to know one another and learn from one another. We also have been interviewing dozens of leaders, both from Brazil and the US. Here you see Nina Silva, founder of the Movimento Black Money. We are actually encouraging donations to her organization that is supporting entrepreneurship and education among the Brazilian Black community. And we are very proud at BayBrazil to work with key players both in Silicon Valley and Brazil who are committed to strengthening our bilateral hub. I'm grateful that we could offer this conference program for free because of the support of our corporate members. BayBrazil's board of directors embodies a cross-section of Brazilian American executives representing tech entrepreneurs, investors, corporations, who I have had the pleasure to work with to shape our organization and grow our tech hub. I have the pleasure today to have two of them here with us, and to start the first part of our program today, I want to invite one of our board members, Fred Aslan. Where are you, Fred? Let's bring Fred. Oh, hi, Fred. Fred Aslan, BayBrazil board member, president and chief business officer at Vividian Therapeutics. And Fred is going to moderate a conversation with two of our guest speakers. And I want to bring Amit Garg. Where is Amit? Hi, Amit. Amit is actually the person who introduced me to Fred in 2010, Amit. Remember?
I do remember. I do remember. You have a great memory.
Awesome. So good to have you both. And Pedro Sorrentino. Do we have Pedro? I don't see Pedro in our call here, but he did confirm we can start our conversation here, and Pedro will join us as soon as he becomes available. So it's so great to have you, Fred and Amit. You know, this pandemic has impacted livelihoods and businesses across the globe. And one of the sectors, if we can call this a silver lining, is the fact that the health sector really has developed through this pandemic. So it's so great to have you here to talk about that and more. Fred, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, thank you, Margarise. Well, let me just start by saying, yes, I mean, it's been 10 years since I've had the opportunity to watch everything that you've done with BayBrazil, and just wanted to congratulate you again and say that we're all really proud of everything you've done. So, Amit, you know, I think the best way for us to get started, right, with a topic like this. So the topic is the silver linings, right, of coronavirus in the healthcare sector. So one of the things I did is just think about, you know, 3 areas specifically where I think there is a silver lining that we can talk about, right? Because usually we're just talking about all the negatives, but it's important to point out some of the trends and some of the silver linings that have come out of it. So maybe I'll just give you my perspective on those 3 themes, and then you can sort of complement if you agree on those perceptions, and we'll go from there. So I think the first one has to do with the public's perception around the pharmaceutical and biotech industry, right? So, you know, every industry has its positive narrative and the negative narrative in terms of public opinion, right? So if you work in the fast food industry, there's the people who say you're contributing to obesity, this is all garbage nutrients, you know, why are you allowed to operate? But I bet you if you just went out and you shut down all of the different McDonald's, there would be a lot of really angry people, right? And the biotech and the pharmaceutical industry are a little bit at the crosshairs of some pretty negative public opinion, right? On the one hand, you know, there's a lot of effort that's put in on innovation, developing new drugs, new treatments. I mean, it really is amazing how many new therapies have come along. But a lot of the public narrative sometimes gets focused on some of the bad actors, you know, that are focused on raising drug pricing. There's a lot of conversation about the margins of pharmaceutical products and biotech innovation. And there's a big discussion that I just feel is happening in the background about how much does the public want to keep funding innovation, given that the US has been in many ways the country where pricing is highest and where a lot of that innovation is happening. And one of the things that I see happening with coronavirus, because of this concerted effort by hundreds of companies to try to develop a vaccine and therapies that can prevent coronavirus, help after people get treated, is there's a sense that there's a better appreciation of what the industry can do, right? That at times of need, the industry is there, it's a very innovative group, and that they can come together to solve problems that basically affect everybody. So that's one positive that I have seen. The second positive that I have seen, you know, the drug development process or the medical device process, whenever you're dealing with regulators like the FDA, it's a pretty bureaucratic process. It has worked very well over the last several years. There's many great products that have come to market, but it's still an area that has, you know, government bureaucracy involved. And one of the things that has been shocking to me is how the FDA has been working hand in hand with industry to try to accelerate the rate at which we bring certain products related to COVID to the market. You know, normally, if you're developing a product, the FDA wants to see a full dossier of what you want to do next, the next step. Then you run through those studies and then you come back to them and you say, look, here's the complete data set. And can I go on to the next level? So things are usually done in series. And what I see happening right now, which is pretty impressive, is how everything is happening in parallel. Before results come in, experts get together to start scenario planning. If the outcome is this is what we're going to allow you to do. If the outcome is that, that's what we're going to allow you to do. So there is more of that back and forth between industry and government to try to find a solution. So hopefully there's some lessons about how they can work closely together that can continue after the pandemic. And then the third one is about telemedicine, right? We all know that healthcare in many ways has been scarce for big segments of the population. And there has been a resistance on the part of the healthcare system to provide reimbursement for telemedicine, to allow information to flow freely because of patient confidentiality issues. And I find that coronavirus, in a way, forced the issue of actually forcing people to have to embrace telemedicine. And for a period of like 3 months, that's all that was available. And things were actually working, I think, better than people would have assumed. And there are great positives that could come out of that. I mean, at the end of the day, a physical exam is an important part of many medical consultations, but there's a lot that you can do via video and that you can do via phone. And for large segments of the population that, don't have access to be driving, 100 miles to gain access to a doctor or can't afford to be waiting in the ER to see someone, maybe we will see better democratization of how healthcare is delivered because of some of the hurdles that we have jumped in order to get to where we are today. So those are like 3, benefits that I see. I don't know what your thoughts are on those or whether you see others, and then maybe we can go beyond medtech. Maybe we would start here.
Absolutely, Fred. A lot of what you said resonates very much with me. And we have Pedro. Hi, Pedro. Good to see you.
Hi, how are you? Sorry for being late here.
No worries. I'll pass to Pedro after me. Fred, allow me to just give a quick introduction on myself and what I do for the audience. So I run Tau Ventures. It's a seed-focused fund in Palo Alto. We invest in US and Canada. We just did our final close a couple of months ago, $17 million. About half of what we do is in health, health AI specifically. So we have invested in a company that takes computer vision to analyze colonoscopies in real time to detect polyps and figure out whether they could be cancerous. We have invested in a company that analyzes genetic sequences to see if there could have been a contamination in a hospital or a patient. This company is very much focused around COVID, and so on and so on. Our entire portfolio is online, tauventures.com. And I formerly was a VC at 2 other funds and was an entrepreneur. So I took the opposite path from Fred. I went from entrepreneur and operator to VC. He went from VC to being an entrepreneur. So going to what Fred just said, I've actually been very encouraged by some developments that have happened in the US. In the last 10 years, especially in the last 5 years, the FDA is actually becoming better and better at how they regulate digital innovation. This was independent of COVID, but COVID has actually accelerated a secular process. And I'll give some very specific examples. About 2 years ago, the FDA created a consortium of companies and said, look, instead of me saying this product's okay, this product's okay, this product's approved, I'm going to approve the company. And if I approve the company, your next product will already be pre-approved in the market. Now that's revolutionary. No other country that I'm aware of has done that. And approval at the company level, and therefore all the products that get launched will get launched more quickly. And then the FDA also created centers for digital innovation, and they have shortened the cycle for how long it takes to regulate. So all of that has been very encouraging to me. The government is actually doing the right thing. And COVID is just accelerating that process out of necessity. So that is a positive impact that COVID has accelerated. Another thing is what Fred was saying around adoption. Obviously, telehealth is getting adopted by necessity now. And my wife is a doctor. She tells me that when she was in residency, in medical school, she was still using paper to take notes. And it's unbelievable to me that in 2005, 2010, that we were using paper to take notes when we have computers and we have You know, we reached the moon 50 years ago. All of that has been accelerated. I'm seeing more and more smart devices being used by doctors. I'm seeing a bigger acceptance of technology within medicine. And I'll give a couple of specific data points. 3 years ago, I went to the graduation of the medical school at Stanford, and the dean at the time, he had an hour to talk about, and he spent that entire hour talking about embrace AI rather than fight against AI. He said, embrace the technology. It will make you into a better doctor rather than fight against the technology. Because if you fight against it, then you'll be out of a job. That is very encouraging when you see that tipping point. More recently, Teladoc acquired Livongo. That was a $20 billion deal, right? That is the deal around telehealth where a startup in digital health and a giant in telehealth came together. And we have been seeing this more and more, both from the tech side, if you look at what Google and Apple and Amazon have been doing in health, and startups, obviously, and then also from the traditional healthcare system. You can look at CVS and Aetna, like that was a $69 billion merger. So that's very encouraging to me. The third point that I have is actually a bit personal, very personal to me. My dad had a stroke a couple of months ago, and my parents live in Brazil. I'm Brazilian. Don't be fooled by the name. And it was unexpected. It was serious. I flew out to Brazil. I took care of him. I spent almost 2 months there. And I was very encouraged by what I experienced in Brazil. I needed to talk to a doctor. I could get a hold of them within an hour using WhatsApp. I needed to coordinate with doctors. I could share all the medical documents. They were actually reaching out to me and asking me, how's the patient doing? And the good news I have is my dad is very well. He's close to normal. But what encouraged me the most is the openness of the system. And in emerging markets, because of less regulation, because of less infrastructure, because of less encumbrance, the systems are more open. That is a lesson for us here in the US, because the US system is Frankensteinian. We have built, overbuilt, and we have tried to fix every single little problem, and we have created a system that's too bloated. And I think COVID is going to is forcing us to be more efficient, is forcing us to get rid of the paperwork. And I'll give just one last data point before I pass to Pedro. We spend in the US $3.3 trillion in healthcare. It's about 20% of our GDP. 1/3 of that, about $1 trillion, is just simply pure paperwork. Just imagine that. So I'll pass it to Pedro.
Yeah, Pedro, please, if you could also provide an introduction. Sorry, I should have done that in the beginning. And I think you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Hi, everyone, and glad to be here. I think it's fortunate with the fact that we've have met in person, and I think throughout all these years. So kind of weird to not be able to get together at one of the incredible Margarise events with all the Brazilian food, but nonetheless, it's a pleasure to have a fruitful and hopefully helpful discussion here. I'm one of the founders of ONEVC. We're a seed-stage firm investing both in the US and in Latin America with high emphasis in Brazil. It's pre-seed through Series A. Typical check size is $500,000. We have about 41 million under management right now, and offices in Sao Paulo and San Francisco back when we used to use them. Healthcare in particular is extremely important for us in both geographies. So the very first investment that we did from the fund was into a company called Hey Doctor that fortunately exited in 5 months to GoodRx, and they were already in a pre-pandemic world surfing asynchronous medicine with basically prescribing medicine for people for mostly for drugs that have high recurrency, but are not super complex. So certain types of antibiotics and everything else that you see today into this, B2C trend with healthcare, things like finasteride or Viagra and so forth. Actually, the technology that they built was what scaled HIMSS. So the CEO was an advisor for HIMSS and then built what they've built, and then they ended up exiting to GoodRx. That's going to go public in the next month and a half. So healthcare is by far one of the most interesting and compelling opportunities in both countries, although Amit, I'm very sorry to hear about your father, and I'm glad that he's better and recovering. You know, and I would say that if someone said, hey, why don't you build the most systematic shit show that you can possibly put together, that would be healthcare in the United States. Now, as a Brazilian that can travel to the US, I've been living in this country for a decade, and I would go to Brazil. Last year, I went to Brazil 18 times. So every 3 weeks, I was in Sao Paulo. Now that I can't, not that I can't, but now that traveling is a little bit more complicated, I had to, get a dermatologist in the US, get a dentist in the US in the past couple of months. And Jesus, I mean, it's a joke how misaligned the entire ecosystem and value chain is, which it presents a phenomenal opportunity for what we do as venture capitalists, but it is insane. And I can't really think of a way that you could fix the intrinsic nature of how the system is broken, but there are many opportunities of over-the-top optimizations that, just those things will become multi-billion-dollar businesses, like you were talking about with the paper example. We have a few healthcare investments as well in Brazil. It's a very different market and polarized market because you have private care versus public care. And happy to talk to you about some of these things in greater detail, but a pleasure to be here and always good to chat.
Yeah, so maybe Pedro, you can take this first question. I'll ask you and Amit, as you look broadly, not just in medtech, but just think a little bit broadly, has COVID changed any investment thesis for you at all? Are there things that maybe you looked at before COVID that you would have been more enthusiastic about and these days no more, and vice versa? Are there areas that, you didn't really pay attention to before, and now because of COVID, you pay attention to more because they could, be interesting growth opportunities, in the next 5-10 years? Maybe you want to go first.
I don't think that anything that we saw in the past changed. We have adapted towards not investing in certain sectors, but we have been in a very, very, very fortunate position where, except for one company that fully recovered already, we had no issues in our entire portfolio. And I believe that it's the fact that happened because it's certainly a little bit of luck and also a little bit of discipline. I think what's happening right now on a day-to-day, the quality of life and the type of life that we used to live is so different. At least for me, as an insanely social person, right, and flying over 200,000 miles a year and so forth. But everything we thought was going to be true in a decade is happening every month now. And the wealth creation opportunity that has happened in the public markets for people that were well positioned in the beginning of this whole thing has been insane. You mentioned Livongo. I mean, that stock is up, 400% this year. So all the trends that we thought were going to be true in a few years, and the liquidity opportunity, the liquidity window for the types of investments that we do, typically 8 years, 10 years, when they work really well, they're all happening now. So, we're investors in Rappi. Rappi is above the board plan, kicking ass. Many investors want to, invest in them again. We're investors in Logi, above the board plan, right? Doing exceptionally well. And then even the ones that had issues in the beginning are now, facing a stellar and beautiful recovery. As you reorganize and certain specific trends within digital transformation accelerate deeper and faster with no reversal. So sure, probably all your customers within the travel industry and restaurant industry, I mean, if you have a lot of exposure to that, you're probably in a really, really bad place right now. But I think, and even Alessio, that is a company that, the full disclaimer, right? Like Alessio is one of our portfolio companies. I'm an advisor to Carol's company and OneSkin. And basically, look like what we've seen in the B2B SaaS space is that when it hit, you look at the revenue from a market, like what markets am I exposed to? Where are my clients? Who am I going to give credit to right now? Who am I, actually going to be okay if they churn? And then I just double down on people that truly understand digital transformation and how that's accelerating. So across the board, we are now seeing all the numbers are either back at where they were in January, or people rolled like this incredible pandemic wave. And by the way, the ones that didn't roll a pandemic wave and were expected to have done so are also being punished. If you look at what happened this week with Slack earnings, and they beat Wall Street expectations, but these were the expectations on a pre-pandemic basis. So when you compare to Zoom almost 4xing revenue, is not enough. And ACV there on a, and ACV stands for annual contract value on a customer is actually decreasing because people are cutting costs on Slack. Slack's too expensive. So I guess there have been a lot of interesting changes. On our side, we're seeing everything we thought was going to be true in the future happening, just happen faster. And our approach to investing continues to be the same, but we have doubled the amount of personal reference checks that we do on a per founder basis for everyone that we partner. And that's pretty much it. I don't believe that we're going to be operating like this for forever, but that stigma that you must meet in person in order to raise money is gone. And all the bankers I spoke with too, I mean, the IPO process will never be the same. And that's a good thing. They're like, probably we're only going to hold in-person meetings in New York and San Francisco, maybe Chicago. But when I used to go to LA or Kansas City or other places for 2-3 meetings, I'm just going to do those remote. And people are fine with that. So we're still learning, right? What's going to be the final output of that? But I think so far it has never been a better time to be a technology founder or a venture capitalist.
Well, thanks, Pedro. What about you, Amit? What have been
a lot of what Pedro mentioned resonates a lot with me because the short answer to your question, Fred, is what we are investing in hasn't changed. How we're investing has. And I'll say some very specific things. Our pre-COVID view was that a company at the seed stage should raise enough money to have 18 months of runway. Now we look more for 18 to 24 months because of the additional uncertainty in the world. We want to make sure that they keep their burn low or lower, or that they raise a little bit more capital. So that's one change. The second change is we want to make sure that there's somebody else in the round with us that has deeper pockets. So we've always wanted to co-invest as seed investors. Seed tends to be much more collaborative. Later stages tend to be much more competitive. At the seed stage, it's very typical that 2 or 3 VCs will come together. We want to make sure that at least one of the other VCs has deeper pockets, because if the company needs more money, yes, we will obviously try to help. I'm sure the other VC who is similar size as us will also try to help. But it's good that there is somebody around the table who can write a bigger check if needed. So it's not a white and black criteria for us, but it's something that we give importance to. The third change, I guess, in how we make investments, we were perfectly happy investing remotely before. My biggest exit so far was a company that I did the seed in 2015 that I did not meet in person, and they got sold for $450 million in 2 years. It was a 10x for us in 2 years. It was a self-driving car company called Autonomy. So I was very, very comfortable with making investments like this already. We have just continued and done that for everyone now. And as far as I think what Pedro is saying, it's made our job more efficient. It allows us to, instead of taking 10,000 meetings, focus on the meetings that we should be actually taking. And it makes, I think, for entrepreneurs also more efficient. I think we didn't have the stigma of doing diligence remotely. I know a lot of folks in the ecosystem had. I think that's gone, and I think that's permanently gone. So as the final thing I'll share in terms of how things have changed, I think it is more difficult right now to raise rounds. We have seen this with the companies in our pipeline and from data from other funds and from bankers and from lawyers. Previously, rounds would take on average 1 to 3 months at the seed stage we're noticing that rounds are taking closer to 3 to 4 or 5 months these days because there's less investors around the table. Everybody's still investing, but they're keeping perhaps a little bit more reserves. Maybe 50% of their capital is on reserve, which means that newer investments take a little bit longer to get done. And that is my caution to entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs shouldn't expect to raise a round as quickly as they would pre-COVID. Obviously, there's going to be exceptions. And also, the valuations have changed. Pre-COVID, we would see seeds closer in the US, closer to the $15 to $20 million valuation or cap. Nowadays, we're seeing closer to 10 to 12, maybe up to 15. So there has been a reduction, and this is well documented. This is not just our data. If you look at surveys out there of thousands of companies, there has been a decrease in valuations of about 30%.
Yeah, so many of the things that you're talking about are things that really have to do more with like a downturn, you know, similar patterns as one saw in 2008 and 2001 in terms of the broader syndication, the longer runway, the impact on valuation. Yeah, because on COVID, you know, when I work with a lot of different companies, and there are some that they're having a hard time attract interest. So for example, if you're in the medical device space and part of your business model entails trying to sell devices by knocking on doctors' offices and showing up in person or going to a congress, with these congresses not being there and these equipment being really expensive, people are not as comfortable, you know, trying to purchase these things online without actually seeing it in person. So that has challenged some business models that have that kind of commercial requirement. Other areas that we're seeing, for example, in laboratories, right? In laboratories, a lot of times your doctor tells you, hey, just do these blood tests, you know, during a regular checkup. But if you don't have anything going on, you know, you will put that off during COVID because you just don't think it's urgent. So volumes have been reduced in certain segments. If you're developing drugs, you know, you require clinical trials. And of course, if you're running a clinical trial in cancer, people will show up despite of COVID. But if you're running clinical trials in areas that are a little bit less acute and less urgent, then you probably won't participate in that clinical trial with that experimental drug. So we are seeing that across healthcare, there are definitely winners and losers, people that need COVID to go away before their businesses can flourish again. So we'll see, right? I mean, I've seen it, you guys must have seen this too. There's so many different reports on how quickly things will come back. You know, some reports say in a year and a half, or the reports say it'll take 8 years for certain industries to actually come back to where they were. So that'll be just interesting to see how the whole thing unfolds with the vaccine and everything else. Other thoughts? Go on, Pedro.
Yeah, I have a different perspective. It's interesting, which hopefully makes the conversation richer. Well, first and foremost, I've never made pandemic, remote investments before, and frankly, like whenever we can meet in person again, I plan on like not doing remote invest. I'm open to it, but it's certainly not my preference. I like to have dinner with the founders or meals with the founders that I partner with, and spend social time with them to deeply understand, how they interact and who they are. And I think it's just really difficult, at least for my style of investing. It's a very personal thing in order to, but I would be open now, which was something that, an amazing story. Amit, like kudos to you for not only having made a great investment, but having done that before this whole thing was even a thing. So we're open, but it's certainly not our preference. At least my preference. I'm not speaking on behalf of all my other partners. And the second aspect, though, in terms of valuation correction, I think it all actually really depends on a company by company basis. We have invested in companies that double almost their valuation or increase their valuation by 50% in a matter of a month through just changing the post-money cap of notes in ultra competitive deals. So there have been like a small percentage of companies that are, what you would call like a supernova round, where the power law of returns of our asset class are also distributed in how the money actually flows. You could call it, power law, you could call it herd mentality, whatever. But there are specific deals that are that suddenly they become super hot, they are expensive, and they move very fast. And we've also seen a lot of the things that you're mentioning, in terms of better control for reserves. So people are just reserving more capital, they're taking more time, they're making sure that you have a syndicate with more people that have deep pockets if the companies, quote unquote, need respirators and so forth. So I think that that is certainly the case. And we've been opportunistic, at least with our investments in Brazil, where we've partnered with 2 different companies at very low prices. And that was done by design in opportunities in which we saw a great future, but it would take a little longer. So we decided to take that risk on those teams. So in Latin America, I believe that you do have valuations and opportunistic, place. I think in the US, depending on the company, it doesn't necessarily apply. And I haven't really seen it see the pre-seed levels a decrease in valuation. The only profile of founders that are in a very complicated situation, and then maybe those are the ones that could take, in my opinion, 3 months or so to close a $1 to $3 million seed round, are founders that are first-time founders that have never raised money before. Though I think that those rounds are certainly more challenging because there isn't that much social validation. But we just did one 2 weeks ago, first-time founders, and in literally 5 days, they were raising 1 million and they had over 40 in interest. And so I think it varies on a deal-by-deal basis.
Oh, yeah, no, Pedro, I hear you. I think the difference may be we are deep tech investors, so inherently the diligence takes longer. It's never under a month, never. 1 to 3 months is the average, and that's across the board. But I think you are focusing on a broader spectrum of companies. So I think you're right that in your data set, maybe the speed of deal making hasn't changed as much. We have noticed in ours.
I see. That makes sense. I know very little about deep tech, but what I see is it's just this massive polarization. Either we have to deal with something that is immediate and we got to make a decision as fast as possible. So, Josh Koppelman said that when they start first round capital, the average velocity from a first meeting to a term sheet was 3 months. Now it's 11 days. He said that on the upfront summit. So I think we're seeing this acceleration across the board. If trends in tech are accelerating the decision making for us with the companies that have profiles that we do, it is what is happening.
Looks like we have a question from the audience, though I am not sure how to ask it.
I can help you with that, Fred.
Thank you.
So Thais Lyons at Cisco Systems is asking, what is the quality on the team and on the venture itself that you most value when analyzing a potential investment?
Yeah, Amit, why don't you take that first and then I'll pass it to Pedro.
Sure. Well, we are seed investors, and I suspect my answer will be very similar to Pedro's. Number one is team. Absolutely. You want to see how they came together, how well they work together, what are the gaps in the team, how well they work with you, because it's going to be a partnership. And understand the phrase I have is we would rather invest in an A team with a B idea than in a B team with an A idea, because the A team will figure out the B idea, will improve it, and will execute. The B team with an A idea will always be stuck with their execution at the B level. So we would much rather invest in a group of people who are building something that's interesting to us, but because of the group of people. Now, that aside, our focus is specifically on companies that are using applied AI. So I'm looking for folks who have created some kind of technology moat, whether it's because of data, whether it's because they have access to some particular resources, databases, or they're collecting, let's say, EMRs or MRIs, or because they have built a cloud platform for robotics and they have created lots of partnerships. But there needs to be something here that's defensible in terms of technology. That's what we look for. We're not looking for PhDs building companies. Of course, if they're PhDs, great. But we think that AI is now at the stage of maturity where you can apply it to solve problems. It's similar to what happened maybe 10, 15 years ago with mobile or 20 years ago with the internet, that it has now become a platform. It's just, instead of being a vertical, it's now horizontal. So the analogy I have from Peter Norwig, actually, who I used to work with at Google, is that we're not investing in stove engineers, meaning people who build better stoves. We're investing in chefs that will take the stove and will cook nice dishes, great dishes. Eventually, it's going to become about cooks. AI is going to become so much more dispersed that it will be a given that it will be part of any company. But that's, I think, about 10 years away.
And Pedro, would you like to take that one quickly? And then we'll bring it to a wrap, right, Margarise?
Yeah, happy to do it. Our investment heuristics involves 3 different elements that we call basically a multiplicative model, which is based, market, team, and product. Certainly, right, without the right humans, it's never possible. So, Amit, it's always the #1 factor. But you want the right people in a market that, for us at least, bottoms up, has at least $2 billion in dollars, not reals, of addressable revenue, right, to be captured in 5 years, and that's the minimum threshold. So this typically eliminates already 70% of the opportunities in Brazil, but it gives us the chance to only work with people that want very large outcomes. It's what works for the math and what we promise our investors. But it's people, market, and product. And product, funny enough, it matters less. It matters a lot, but if you have the right people at the right market, you can even have a worse product or a not so great product or a little clumsy, and it could still work tremendously until you can refactor and make it better. And there are many examples out there. Salesforce probably is one of the best ones. That company is such an incredible story. The product is horrible. I haven't seen anyone that really likes using it, but it's a monopoly that has, basically everyone at some certain point has to use that product. So that's typically what we look for. When it comes to hopefully have good judgment with people, it's always trying to understand why are these founders building that specific business and how much suffering and pain they've gone through in order to understand the level of resilience that they have. That for me is just so important, because it's not easy to build a multi-billion-dollar company in 7 years. It's going to be painful, and you need to have this energy to keep on going. So we always try to understand some of these things, because today it's so affordable to start a company, and it's so cool that there are so many people that are starting companies that shouldn't be starting them. And I've made the mistake of funding people like that, and it's horrible, because they give up, they complain too much, and so forth. So these are just a few data points.
Thank you, Pedro. Margarise, is this time for a transition to the next panel? Because if it is, I want to thank my co-panelists for the time that they took and for your insights. And we're all adapting to this new format. I certainly missed being in a big crowded room with like hundreds of people, but that'll happen again one day soon, hopefully.
It certainly will, and I hope to see you soon in person and really catch up with other things. It's so great to see you. Thank you, Fred, for participating. Amit and Pedro, great to hear your insights and your experience. I'm a fan of your work, and I'm very thankful that you joined us today.
Thank you for having us, Margarise. Echoing Fred, it's amazing what you have done with BayBrazil. So congrats to you and the team.
Thank you. Thank you.
Obrigado. Thank you.
Ciao, ciao. Obrigado.
See you soon. So for those of you joining us in the middle, this is the last event in our 3-month conference program. So welcome and thank you for joining us. As I mentioned during my presentation, the Brazilian entrepreneurial ecosystem has developed quite a bit in this past 6-7 years. And I'm very pleased that we are hosting today some of the entrepreneurs that are very active both in Brazil and now here in Silicon Valley as well. Let me welcome them. André Ferraz. Hi, André. Good to see you. André is founder and CEO at Incognia. Carolina Reis. Hi, Carolina. Great to have you again with us. Carolina is co-founder and CEO of ONEVC. And Alessio Alonso, founder and CEO of Pipefy, who most BayBrazilians met in our past conference in 2015 at SRI, when you did a pitch of a Pipefy. Amazing journey you've had. So great to have you. And last but not least, I'm honored to have our board member, Andy Sal, Managing Director of Silicon Valley Bank, that will be helping us moderating this panel. Thank you so much for joining us and helping us close this program.
Thank you, Margarise. Again, congratulations on a fantastic series. I believe, not correct, that I to be first.
And somehow your sound is kind of a breaking. Let us know. Please repeat your question. Maybe we'll get better. No, sorry, now we cannot hear you. Okay, it's connecting to your audio. Please unmute your mic, and I think now it's going to work.
How's that? Better?
Much better. Yay.
Okay. You know, something about the AirPods that don't seem to agree with Zoom for me. But anyway, again, I wanted to start by congratulating you, Margarise, on 10 years at BayBrazil, and a really fantastic summer series for this, what is our conference this year. I think I was the first one to kick off the series, and now I'm part of the last one. So I guess some bookends for you.
Yes,
so,
you did. You kick off with the innovation economy and with Anderson, Eric, Antoine. Yes, great. We have you back.
I've got the right shirt on too, I think.
Extra points. What a beautiful shirt you have.
Yeah. What a surprise. Well, thank you, Margarise, and great job by Fred and Amit and Pedro. And we're going to go to the other side of the equation here and chat with the founders and entrepreneurs here. And as Margarise asked me to moderate the discussion, I was thinking about it. And I thought, gosh, you know, I met Alessio just when he got here from Brazil. And Carolina, the same thing when she was coming up to pitch at TechCrunch Disrupt, and Andre I just met last year also on his way from Brazil. And I said, gosh, we ought to take the opportunity just to reflect a little bit on that journey as Brazilian entrepreneurs who've come to the Bay Area to launch their businesses. And I thought that'd be a great part of our discussion today. And then we'll flip over to sort of the same themes that the investors were talking about, sort of how are we navigating the pandemic. And so with that being said, I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves a little bit in more detail and tell us about your companies too. And we'll start with Carolina, please.
Great. So pleasure to be here. Thanks, Margarise. Yeah, so I came to the US in 2016 when I met Andy. I was here maybe for 6 months or so. And our company, at that time, we were working, so we are a biotech company. We were building human skins to replace animal testing. We have evolved quite a bit since then. Today, we are a longevity company developing technologies focusing on addressing the cause of aging, and and products that will promote skin rejuvenation, but eventually can be extended beyond skin. So we kind of, took a step back. In order to address skin aging, we need to understand aging as a whole. And now we have this approach that can be applied to skin first, but eventually can really promote rejuvenation in a systemic level. So it's been a pretty exciting and challenging journey. A lot of ups and downs, but I'm very happy to be here today and share a little bit of, the progress that we have made so far. And now that we are about to bring our product to the market after, 4.5 years of a lot of research, really deep science. Very excited.
Great. Well, certainly a huge market opportunity. I would love your product. So let us know how it progresses. We'll talk more about it. Alessio, over to you, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Marisa. Thank you for the invite today. It's a pleasure to be here because, I think you two were kind of one of the big hosts of the Bay Area for me when I flew for the first time there in 2015. And since then, that kind of first pitch at one of the events, a lot of stuff happened. Fortunately, for kind of all great stuff, the pipeline had a chance to grow a lot since then. And also kind of happy to be here and happy Silicon Valley Bank customer as well. We've been kind of really supportive since the beginning. So really thank you for the invite. For the ones that do not know what we do, we help companies to streamline their execution. Basically, provides a process management platform. It's a no-code platform, and we help managers step-by-step guide the execution of their teams and automated execution, especially in teams like HR, finance, or teams that run kind of high-volume back-office type of processes. We started in Brazil, but now kind of we're scaling up globally. We have customers in US, big enterprises, customers in Brazil, Europe, Asia, and we've been growing a lot since then.
Well, it's been great watching your progress since we first had lunch up back in 2015. So looking forward to talking more about it. Andre, over to you finally.
Thanks, Andy. Well, I came more recently, actually, in the end of last year, so didn't have much time to really have the real Silicon Valley experience. A couple months after I came here, then started all this pandemic. But yeah, so far the experience has been great. Being able to hire great talent, I think is one of the biggest advantages of being here. And yeah, for those who don't know what Incogni does, we are enabling mobile applications to reduce friction from their authentication processes. So when you're opening an account, logging in, or doing a payment, we try to reduce the friction from that process, and that leads to more conversions to the apps. And our ultimate goal is to eliminate every type of human action to authenticate in a service, like typing passwords or scanning faces or fingerprints, for example. And the way we're doing it is by using location behavior, which is something that is very unique to each person, to create a unique fingerprint so you can authenticate to those systems securely, but also with no friction.
Great. Well, Andre, yeah, the timing was a little bit tough, but hopefully we can get back to more of a normal Silicon Valley experience in the not too distant future. And you know, that normal might be different. So we could talk a little bit about that too. So let me ask each of you, really, just as you're, sort of aspiring entrepreneurs in Brazil, and taking that decision, hey, I'm gonna move. I'm actually gonna leave my home country. I'm gonna go to the Silicon Valley and really give it a go to launch my business. And Andre, I know you're early in the journey, but I'll start with you, or stay with you here. What was a surprise that you had, when you got here that was different, good or bad, than kind of what you thought it might be like here in the Bay Area?
Yeah, well, the first thing is not really a surprise, but it was a confirmation that exceeded my expectations, and that was around talent, right? The first thing I focused on here was on building our executive team for the US. So we were looking for a marketing professional, also someone for sales, someone for customer success, and I was really impressed of like how deep experience people had in very specific things. For example, we were trying to find someone that had experience on scaling a company from like a couple $1 million in revenue to hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions actually, that were in the security space and more specifically on risk-based authentication. So if you describe that for a role in Brazil, you're probably not going to find anyone, right? And if you do, you're going to find one or two people. We were very prescriptive on that, and we were able to find a lot of people. And yeah, I think obviously one of the challenges was that I didn't know much people over here, so I had to rely on recruiting firms. Which is one other thing that I thought like this would not work. But even though I decided to move forward and I've hired a recruiting firm and they did an amazing job, you know, so this was the best surprise I could say. And then on the side, one other positive surprise was the fact that you can buy couscous and tapioca flour over here. So I can eat the same stuff I used to eat when I was in Recife. But yeah, and then finally, one other thing that's really impressive, even though like we're facing all these fires and all that stuff right now, there's so much wildlife around, right? The nature is so well preserved in the area, which was also very impressive. Very, very beautiful place for sure.
Yeah, once the air quality clears up, we can get back outside. Carolina, how about you?
So one funny thing that I found out when I moved here is that San Francisco has no summer. So I thought I was moving to California, like Southern California, so it would be like sunny, surfing. No, not here in the north. But aside of that, one thing that really I felt very different from Brazil when I was at IndieBio, that's this biotech accelerator. And you are surrounded by these, you know, brilliant scientists from, you know, great institutions, and everyone is thinking so big. Like we are working to solve like the most fundamental problems in human health and, you know, related to the planet as well. So this mindset of like, you know, I can work on someone that can really impact like billions of people, and yeah, really like move the needle in terms of, you know, health and our planet and, you know, creating this better future was something that I absorbed from, you know, from my peers or from this ecosystem. I think in Brazil, I mean, coming from Minas, we were, I don't know, kind of trying to solve a small problem in our, you know, city or in our area. And here I saw that we could do so much more. And now like tackling aging, it's almost like we have so much work to do, but the impact can be so big. So this definitely has changed since I moved here.
Amazing, the level of ambition, I guess you're saying. That's great. Alessio, how about you? For those entrepreneurs in Brazil that are thinking of making that same journey, what surprised you, either good or bad?
I would say like two things. The first one is, because by far was my second company, and I always thought like my first business, like if I had the chance to be based in the Bay Area, get the right investors, the right ecosystem, things will be much easier. And eventually there's a type kind of superpower in the air that kind of helps people really succeed. And not exactly. Like for me, I think like if I could share those two lessons learned first, like Carolina mentioned first, people here, they have kind of really big ambitions about what they want to accomplish and how they want to change the world and what's possible to be achieved, instead of kind of look to constraints and just try to copycat or kind of jump into the next opportunity. But fundamentally, they are as good as kind of great talent we can find almost everywhere. And they are kind of hard workers as we also are. That's the first lesson learned. Like I saw like my neighbors, my peers, like, you know, we're doing well. Like maybe if we work hard, we'll be able to compensate that lack of like superpower, let's say. The second thing that for me, it was also eye-opening is that I think when you are outside the ecosystem, you think that things here are easier, and that's not exactly what happens. Definitely there's a strong and well-developed ecosystems for sure, but actually we see so many tech companies because there are so many companies starting every single day. Using a good metaphor, it's like, imagine I used to be a soccer player in Uzbekistan, and then I thought like, oh, if I lived in Brazil, it would be the next Neymar. Not necessarily, man. The life will be hard for everyone here, because there are just so many people hustling on coffee shops, try to kind of pursue their dreams and do all that stuff. So that's something that I also learned. Like definitely there's a huge ecosystem. Definitely there's kind of really senior talent, like Andrea mentioned. I went through the same process and I got really impressed. Like, hey, it's perfect to find the talent we need here. But on the other side, it's also really, really competitive. And just like a different magnitude of scale in terms of number of people trying to be successful, launch their next thing, raise capital, and so on. So the ecosystem is really powerful, but doesn't matter that things will get easier just because we are in the Bay Area. That's my lesson learned.
Great points, and you know, I
Sorry, Andy, your mic is kind of oh yes.
That's good.
Better? Okay.
Better.
So I was just echoing that having spent time outside of the Bay Area, I've been here for 10 years now, that it's really the size, the breadth and depth of the ecosystem here, and the level of ambition that really makes it different. It's kind of makes it really is in many respects the epicenter of global innovation. And to your point, Alessio, very competitive too. It's kind of like swimming with the sharks to some degree. But you guys have all been successful as founders here in the Bay Area, in maybe combining two questions here. You know, obviously as founders, you've encountered challenges, but maybe if you can describe one of the challenges that you've encountered, and how has being an entrepreneur from Brazil helped you be successful to overcome those challenges? What's different about Brazilian entrepreneurs, do you think that's helped you be successful here in the Bay Area? And maybe Alessio, we can start with you, to stay with you here.
Yeah, good question, Andy. I think the advantage of being Brazilian, I think it's like two things. First, we learn, because usually how we start companies in Brazil, like we figure out how to be lean and be really thoughtful in our investments, and really figure out creative ways to achieve great results being lean. And the second thing, especially in the Bay Area and being an immigrant, I had like a mindset in the past, like, I'm not as good as and sophisticated as the ex-Google guy, the ex-Facebook founder here in my 500 startups batch, or the ex-Stanford / ex-Harvard guy, and so on. And I really kind of compared myself a little bit when I saw those guys used to be really competitive. But then one of my investors said like, hey, do you think we're investing in you because any of those attributes? No, like we're investing because you are creative. And even knowing that you do not know exactly how you're gonna figure out the path to grow, we know you're gonna find a way. And as you always did. So I think being immigrant and Brazilian, it gives us the excuse to do not also know the traditional etiquette and the things that you should follow. Or for me, like, there's no dumb question because I'm an immigrant. I do not know what I do not know. So I always have stuff, assuming that the most important thing is 1 month from now, I'm going to return, moving really fast, smarter, and not doing the same damn question again. That's totally fine. And being Brazilian, it's almost like a superpower for that. No one's expect something out of the box. Like, brilliant.
That's awesome. Carolina, how about you?
I think one of the characteristics of a Brazilian is the persistence, right? We don't give up easily. And if I compare myself, I came to the US mainly because I didn't find the same opportunity in Brazil to really make this company happen in the biotech ecosystem. So we didn't have, any biotech ecosystem in 2016, and investments was not an option. And if I came here, and I came here with one clear purpose, this is gonna work no matter what, and I have no choice. So it's better work, because if I go back to Brazil, the scenario will still be the same. So I think this lack of option in terms of really betting all that you have in this company is something that it helps us, and it's totally different, as Alessio was saying. If an ex-Googler or Facebook or someone that came from Harvard or Stanford, they can find a job anywhere, anytime. So I think the lack of option make us, and also like your determination when you know what you want, make us stronger in this journey here.
Great answer. And Andre, how about you? Last but not least.
Well, I totally agree with what you both just said, and especially what Alessio said in terms of being lean, right? In our case, for example, when this is my second company, and the first one, like it took us almost 4 years to raise the first seed round. The seed round was like about $300,000. I don't even think this exists over here, right? So and that lasted about 2 years for us to reach break even and grow the company with its own profits. So this definitely plays very positively, especially in moments like this, right, where valuations are going low, the funding ecosystem is not as a year ago. So yeah, I think it's a great advantage to have that experience of like building a company from scratch with not many resources, and also with not many like senior talent. Once you get here, you get funding and you're able to hire the senior people. You realize that you're playing in a different league, right? But with the experience that made you think differently and be more thoughtful about things. So I think that's great for sure.
So creativity, determination, and being lean, sort of knowing how to build startups with less, all great attributes, and I'd agree, they're great Brazilian attributes as well. So let's with the remaining time we have, let's shift gears and sort of move into the conversation that tied to what the investors were talking about, and that's sort of what adjustments are we making in light of the pandemic? I think both Amit and Pedro were talking about sort of cash runway, making sure that now that they want to make sure that companies have at least 18 to 24 months cash runway. So, Andre, as you a few months into your journey here and in launching your business, how has the pandemic affected your business, and what adjustments are you making?
Oh man,
I know it's a big question.
Okay. But yeah, well, to bring some context, our first company was using pretty much the same technology, the same location technology that we rely on for our security business, but for a different use case, right? We were leveraging the same location technology for marketing use cases, and most of our customers were physical retailers, right? So basically what happened on that business was, okay, all of our customers suddenly start calling us saying, I'm going to delay payments, or I'm canceling the contract because I'm shutting down my physical stores, right? So March was definitely a very crazy month for us. We need to go through a big restructuring. And one of the things we decided to do was, first of all, let's pivot a company to the new product. So we pivoted to the security product because on the other hand, most traditional companies were forced to transform themselves very quickly to become more digital, right? And this means that all of their employees, all of their customers started accessing their products via the internet, and especially mobile apps. So the need for easier and more secure authentication methods became much bigger, right? So we pivoted the company really fast. And one other thing that we decided to do was, we still have an interesting asset here on the marketing side. Why don't we try to find an exit? And 4 weeks ago, we found someone to buy it. Actually, Magazine Luiza in Brazil bought the first product we've built, and that helped us extend the runway very significantly. So yeah, it was a very intense time, pivoting the company, expanding to a new market, and going through an M&A process. So yeah, the past few months were pretty exciting, I have to say.
Wow. Well, congrats on the sale, and really you're still at the beginning of the journey, right? So with
yeah.
It'll be really cool to see how you progress here. Alessio, how about you?
In our case, I would say that we have two phases. At the beginning of COVID, we forecasted like a negative impact in our customer base. Actually, it got like literally 10 times worse than we expected, especially because we have like a long tail of small self-service businesses. And as they, like Andrea mentioned, most of those companies in retail and traditional business, they went out of business or drastically reduced their spends or headcount. Proportionally, they would reduce their investments with us. But what was the really interesting thing, we saw a really increase of kind of engagement on the top of funnel of the business, especially on the mid-market and enterprise segment. Because what happened is, overnight, almost every company in the planet, they had to figure out how to enable their team members to keep productive working from home. And if you think, yes, and if you think there's a first wave of synchronous communication that basically video and chat, that's why Zoom is growing really fast. But there's a much more kind of long-term sustainable and slower wave on structured collaboration. Like, because now you need to figure out how to let your employee access their systems working from home. And how I'm gonna open an HR request working from home. How I'm gonna open IT requests, all that type of structured collaboration workflows. The less we have human interactions, the more you need structure to help people find information and collaborate,
100%.
But also have structured data to provide people control and see if they're moving forward or not, and where are the bottlenecks of their businesses. So, Andy, if I would say, so far, so good. We had a kind of our third consecutive months ever, kind of record results, growing really fast. So we are already working under a really strong positive agenda and really figure out how we can keep accelerating and leveraging on that momentum.
Fantastic. And I think that, again, ties back to that acceleration that Pedro was talking about, that this moment in time has really caused whole world to, from a tech perspective to really accelerate. And so you're well positioned for that. Fantastic. Carolina, over to you in terms of the adjustments that you've made.
Yeah, so the main adjustment was really shut down the activities in the lab. That's something that we did only for a month, luckily, because we are an essential business. So the first month of March, we shut down because no one really knew what was going to happen. But as soon as we were feeling a little bit more confident, we started like coming back. So luckily it didn't, we didn't have many delays in terms of the science evolving and everything that we are building. And on the other hand, since we are in this field of, aging and longevity and, health, I think COVID just came to reinforce how important is that, health for us, right? It's our main asset. And if we don't take care and if we don't do things to preserve and, improve our health, we will be always more susceptible to a pandemic or whatever, unexpected event we are, will be eventually exposed to. So I think in this sense, the funding for companies that are targeting age-related disease or improving immune health, and even our product now that's more focused on skin health than only beauty itself, it's really aligned to the trends that we are seeing. That what are the essential things that we can't give up, right? We need to eat, we need to have shelter, and we need to have a good health. So I think in this sense, we are aligned with this, new kind of behavior from the consumer sides, and will be interesting for us as we go to the market.
Yeah, well, I know the whole sort of life sciences, healthcare sector has been really on quite a lot of momentum in that sector in particular. So, again, I think, Carolina, you'll be well positioned to take advantage of that, hopefully. Okay. I'll ask the panelists here as we're starting to get low on time to keep your answers a little more compact here. And the last couple of questions, Andre, starting with you in terms of, during these uncertain times, in terms of how you're communicating to the investors in the business, how are you going about that? Any advice you have for entrepreneurs in terms of communications to your investors?
Perfect. Well, overall, I'd say that transparency is extremely important, right? And it's a must. But this is the moment where it pays off, right? Which is if you are not being transparent over time about the situation of the business, and you get to a point in which we got, for example, in which we had to pivot really quickly, you would catch your investors off guard, right? And that could lead to analysis paralysis, which could break the company, right? So I was always very transparent when I saw that things were not going well on the legacy business. We were able to move very fast because we had the support from the board, right? We were able to be decisive and quick and act really fast. And this was extremely important, right? So now we're in a phase in which we're in a new business. It's growing very fast again, but we were only able to do this because of transparency.
Transparency, which leads to no surprises. So that's great advice. Alessio, over to you in terms of, your business has grown quite a bit, since we first met, and how are you managing today, working remotely through Zoom? How do you think about company culture at Pipefy? Can you maintain it virtually? How have you adjusted to working remotely at Pipefy?
Yeah, in our case, I think we had like an easier transition. We already had like 65% of our product in engineering org working remotely across offices in Brazil, but fully remote as well, even in other regions. So we already have like we always kind of had a remote first playbook in the company, exactly to make sure that all the remote team members didn't feel as a second-class citizen inside the organization. So that helped a lot. And basically, after kind of this big change, what we really had to do is just kind of move other more business-oriented roles to kind of full remote, like support, sales, customer success, and all those functions, which we had a concern in the beginning, especially because those teams, they are more kind of people-oriented, the office culture, the day-to-day work and teamwork, collaboration, motivation. Usually, that's what we expected. That would impact a lot, but so far after the transition, so good, like really, really good. Definitely, there are like some negative points, but on the other side, people over kind of engagement, they are happy to not having to commute every day, save time, stay close to their families as well. And something that we are learning now, especially across all those teams, is especially when you think about kind of tech companies and tech businesses, all the culture and the working environment, it's built around the office about having cool snacks, working late, spending a lot of time together. You're going to be kind of the best friends of your team members and all of that crazy startup routine. And eventually now everything is here, remote, on those, in this virtual environment. And what we realized first, the quality and the level of training of your frontline managers is critical, critical. Because in the end, the working experience and what we understand as culture basically transitions a lot to that one-on-one relationship between the team members and their dark reports, the leaders of all those small teams. And making sure those frontline managers, they are good people managers and they know how to motivate and engage the team. And also add a few topics in the agenda that will replace that water cooler chat and make sure we're going to keep building those human and close bonds. It's really important. And the more and the better trained is your frontline team, probably the better you'll be able to perform. And at company-wide, I think these were kind of the big lessons learned we had.
Will you go back to, the fully normal, or are you going to stay virtual? What's the company policy at Pipefy in terms of going back to the office at this point?
We are definitely going remote. We already had the tech part of the business more remote than in the office. But definitely, we run like surveys with the team, and basically no one is expecting to come back to the old routine. Okay. Most of the team members want flexibility to at least work from home twice a week or sometimes even more. I see that kind of hard work, intellectual work, analysis, and kind of screen work. There's not like a big reason to be in the office anymore. We are considering the office more as a collaboration environment where you go to chat with other teams, meet people, train, kick off stuff, and recharge the level of energy, and then that in-person time that it's kind of credits that allow you to also work remotely more than the way we describe is now we are going to allow teams go back to the office in the next year, but for team members that want to work remotely from the office.
Right.
That's how we
Excellent. Yeah, I think we're very much aligned in terms of our organization at the bank in terms of how we're thinking about the future. I think it's going to be a lot more flexible. Carolina, and I'm going to wrap up here with the final question for you before we go back to Margarise. And Margarise, you let me know if we have time for any questions from the audience. But all this uncertainty certainly leads to a lot of stress, and being a CEO is already and a founder already a pretty stressful job. So how do you deal with wellness, and how do you think about it? And what advice would you have for other founders in terms of handling the uncertainty and the stress of the times?
Yeah, sure. So I believe that we build resilience over time, right? So resilience is a result of your actions, you know, that you develop for a long time, and this requires, you know, you have a very I would say a lot of discipline with your routines, and then I think a lot of the steps that will interfere in your performance, they are related to keep yourself like at the, you know, in a good mental and body health. So I, as the company, studying longevity and really propagating this to other people, we as a founder needed to also to incorporate those practices, but this is also aligned with something that I truly believe. So I have this kind of routine of meditation and physical exercising, because I know how important this is for our performance, for our health. And of course, like eating healthy. But I think now with the pandemic, one thing that I have been discovered a lot, and Andre mentioned, is kind of the beauty of the nature that we have around us, right? So since all the kind of the big cities that they're like, you know, shut down, we needed to explore, you know, nature, and this is an amazing way to recharge ourselves and to really, you know, find inspirations and finding new ideas. And I've been really surprised by the beauty of this, you know, national parks that we have around. So a little getaway on the weekend, it's great for, you know, a good recharge and come back like to deal with another tough week or whatever you need to deal with.
Fantastic. Well, that's great advice, and in a terrific way to wrap up our discussion. Margarise, do we have time for any questions from the audience, or did you want to bring on the other entrepreneurs?
Yeah, before that, let's, in the spirit of celebrating entrepreneurship of Brazilians entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, let's bring some other entrepreneurs that are joining our call. Hey, hello, Antonio. Antonio Moraes, and I think Joni Girardi also is with us. Joni, are you with us? I think he is. Carol, you can unmute and put it, John, with us. And I think we have Davi Macedo also, and Paulo Martins. So great hearing about Pipefy, ONEVC, Incognia, and I would love to bring Antonio and also hear what's going on at XPHealth. Antonio, welcome.
Thank you, Margarise, and nice to see you all. Hi, Carol. Hi, everyone.
Hey there.
So tell us what's going on at XPHealth and how you are dealing with the pandemic there, Antonio.
Sure, and thanks again, Margarise. So just a quick context. I started about 1.5 years ago, so just before the pandemic, an on-site vision care business. So what we're doing, basically bringing equipment like this that you can see here to do eye exams inside large companies and providing a full service like eyewear, and also basically edging the lenses of the glasses on site and providing everything done in 1 hour. Right, so like Andy just saw, you're putting your glasses there, you would be able to get new glasses in 1 hour without leaving your office. The shelter in place came, business absolutely completely disrupted, like a flat line to zero, that kind of story that you guys, many have been through as well. what we pivoted the business is basically we created a cloud platform using deep learning to basically, we do a face scan of the employee's face. We recommend the best frames according to your face shape using computer vision and deep learning. And then you are able to try all the frames that you like at home. You don't need to have prescription. I see people without wearing glasses right now. The core problem that we are addressing is that I think everyone here is using screens for more than 10 hours per day, right? I don't know, very hard that someone is using less. Some cases we hear people using 16 hours per day because you work and then you connect with family, right? We all have family in Brazil, or most of us, and then you go and watch Netflix. So you the entire day in front of screens. And we've seen the demand for blue light glasses increase 1,000% comparing the last 5 years until when the pandemic hit. So we're very focused on that. Still early, we launched the first pilot with one of our clients, a large company here in the Bay Area. And we have some more coming, but it's been really like a roller coaster. Very, very hard in many moments. We had to let go a lot of people in the team. And I think maybe one of the biggest lessons was to raise more money than you think you need, right? So I think we made that decision in January. We decided to raise like almost 3 times more than we were planning initially. Now we have money for 35 months, which is more than we need. So I would definitely recommend people that are maybe going through fundraising processes. Of course, it's always hard, but instead of planning for maybe doing 40 meetings, plan to do 120 meetings, right? And it's always possible to get there, but it's a lot of effort. But that's, yeah, my last few months there in a nutshell. And happy to continue the conversation.
Thanks, Antonio. I also want to bring Joni Girardi, founder and CEO of DataSelf. Joni, are you there? Yes, he is. Joni is a veteran, Brazilian veteran in Silicon Valley. How long you been here, Joni? Oh, sorry, we can't hear you, Joni. I think now we can. Go ahead. Yeah. Oh, hear you there. All right. Try again. Well, beautiful background. but Joni, I think he's been here for over 20 years. We met a long time ago, and he's also pivoted his company. Hopefully he's gonna be back before we end. And do we have Davi and Paulo with us? Oh, I think they were not able to join us. So, but it's been great. I know how hard it is, to navigate your businesses through these challenging times. I appreciate hearing from you, catching up with you, and I'm so looking forward to meet you in person sometime soon.
Margarise, I thought I heard Joni. Joni, are you on now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, wow. Okay. Miracle of technology.
We cannot see you, but we cannot hear you, Joni. But
maybe now you can hear. Can you hear me again?
Oh, yes. I was just telling everybody that you've been here in Silicon forever, from Porto Alegre.
Don't say forever. Forever is too long. Yeah, no, I've been here for over 20 years. I've been part of 5 different startups. One of them from Brazil, another one from the US, 2 from the US, and 2 I created myself. The latest one that I've been working with has been already for 15 years, so it's no longer a startup, but it's in the big data part of the business. We help small and medium-sized companies make sense out of their data. And this whole pandemic has been good for us because, in a way, there's this whole scenario where many people don't trust data because of fake news, right? There's fake news all over the place. But that's in the COVID and politics. It's very hard to believe in, it's very hard to know who to believe in when you talk about politics and COVID. But we focus on corporate data. And a lot of the facts about businesses, threats, opportunities are in the company's data. So we have a technology in the cloud that also uses artificial intelligence, machine learning, to help decision makers look at the trends, clients, opportunities, products that are doing better and doing worse. The whole pandemic, we have seen about a third of our clients grow significantly in business, and they're keeping us super busy. We're also growing since last year. A third of the clients are gone. We don't know what's going on. They don't reply to emails. They don't pay their bills. So it's sad in a way that we don't know if they're doing well or not. And the other third are kind of normal. So we are, in a way, fortunate to be in the cloud business where it's keeping us super busy. So overall, we're happy with we're happy that from a business standpoint, we're doing well, even though we're feeling the pain with a lot of the businesses.
That's great, Joni. I would love, you're someone that I'm sure can tell lots of stories of being a Brazilian entrepreneur here in the Silicon Valley. I look forward to catching up with you in person and everybody else as soon as possible. Margarise, at this point of the traditional conference, we'd be sharing a glass of wine now or networking over caipirinha or something like that, but we'll have to look forward to that hopefully next year. So again, congratulations, Margarise, on a great conference and 10 great years at BayBrazil. I want to thank both Joni and Antonio for joining us in this discussion. In particular, thanks to Carolina, Alessio, and Andre for being terrific panelists today. Really appreciate your comments. And with that, well, thank everybody for joining us today, and I'll wish you a good evening.
Thank you so much for moderating, and it's so great to see you as always. And thank you, Andrea, Carolina, Alessio, Antonio, Joni. Wish you much success. I love to see you again very soon in person. And for all of you who join us both at Zoom and Facebook, this conversation, as well as our past webinars, will be all in our YouTube channel in case you want to refer to your friends and watch again the insights that we've discussed throughout this 3-month program. Thank you so much. Muito obrigada. Tchau.
Ciao.